everybody. I'm Dennis Labriola, and this is Seventh Inning Stretch Reflections on the Game of Life, the podcast. And I'm so excited to have as my guest today, good friend of mine, Dr. Sirlin. And I guess what a privilege. And we know each other for what? Like 20 years?
20 years, I'd say 19 years. Yeah.
Wow. And you look really good.
Thank you. I was just looking and thinking, I agree completely.
Of course, why wouldn't you? So we're going to have some fun today, and we think that this will be interesting as well. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend. Dr. Andrew he's a chiropractor, has been a practicing chiropractor for 37 years. You don't look that old, but I know you are.
16.
Yeah, sure. All right. And he's also a professional consultant and a professional public speaker. And he focuses mainly on the impact of the mindset on peak performance skills. So vitally important. Speaks to so many different organizations, whether it be Fortune 500 companies, whether it be ministries, whether it be men's groups, whether it be one-on-one, does a lot of stuff. So he's also the former chief operating officer of Men's Discipleship Network, and that was founded by Pastor Scott Caesar, and you're currently on the leadership team of that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But the thing that I found most interesting was that in 1988, he was the New York State men's bodybuilding champion, and I think we're going to try to find out a lot about these things. So, hello, my friend, and welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And I know that you have so many different passions in life, as many of us do. And due to our work together and our friendship, I have had the privilege of actually watching you and watching your passions evolve over the last 20 years, which is a good thing. And actually attaining a much stronger focus than maybe when I first met you. So I thought it would be interesting if we kind of looked at the how and the who impacted you as your life passions, or what maybe some people would call your mission or your purpose, and how that they've all developed, and to find out a little bit about what contributed to your success. So I want to start though what I found the most intriguing, and what I'm focusing on is this 1988 New York State Men's Bodybuilding Championship. Because you see, for me, I've always envisioned bodybuilders as being big, brawny guys, muscular guys, really big guys, and that's really not you. You're kind of like, like a little guy, not little, but shortish. You're not one of those. You're not. You're kind of, you're
atypical.
You're a smaller man.
I was
a smaller man.
When I competed, I was a lightweight. There's different weight classes.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'6".
He's 5'6". That's what I'm saying. All right. Okay.
But Mr. Universe and stuff, Dorian Yates was 5'8". Of course, he had me by about 100 pounds. Right. But bodybuilders aren't always tall. In fact, most of them probably aren't tall.
Yeah, I had met years ago. Patty and I were out in California. We had met very briefly Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes.
And I always considered him like this giant of a man. And I found out that I think I was taller than him, and I'm only 5'10".
Yeah.
So I think that if you Google him, he's like, they say he's like 6'2". He's not. He's like, to me, he's like, maybe 5'10", and
a taller person actually has more difficulty building their body like that, because to be tall, they tend to be more of an ectomorph. It's more like they tend to be thinner.
Yeah.
In general, when they're very tall.
Right.
They tend to be.
So how long did you compete? Because this is a competition, obviously, right? So you trained, and how long did you actually compete?
I only competed. I competed once in 1984 and then in 1988.
So you won and quit.
Yes, I was supposed to
went out on top.
I was supposed to go to the national championships the next week, and I quit.
All right.
I wanted to eat.
Did you bring a photo with you?
We
can maybe look at it a little bit later.
I might have one in my wallet.
In your wallet?
Yeah.
Okay. You carry that around with you?
Yeah.
As a reminder. This is what I used to look like. All right. So obviously that you've established, a discipline that would carry you not just in thought, but really in action and in your purpose. Um, and I've always known you as one that kind of looked at having proper health, proper nutrition, being important to you. And that's true even when you were a boy, a young boy, right?
I guess it had my dad died when suddenly when 2 days after I graduated high school. I was 17 years old, and that just kind of changed my perspective on life in many ways, obviously, and certainly on health. He died of a heart attack. He was a smoker. Back then, I don't know too many people who were eating really well. And, it just changed my perspective on how I wanted to live health wise.
Okay.
And that's when it started for me.
So bring us a little bit from that point. That impacted your life, losing your dad at such a young age.
Yeah.
I mean, that impacted your life. It kind of brought to the front of your thinking, the importance of nutrition, of wellness, things like that. So take us a little bit about what your thought process was in handling that for you yourself personally, and of course then entering into college and then deciding chiropractic was what you wanted to do. So give us a little bit about that history.
So I entered college in September of 1976, Nassau Community College. I had not done very good in high school. I was not they told me I wasn't very smart, to be quite honest with you. I was good at math. They said, go for accounting. And it wasn't a big deal to me. So I went for accounting. I hated it, but a college professor who was teaching English noticed something about me and started doing some testing with me. And basically, long story short, I'm dyslexic. That was my biggest issue, was dyslexia. And in so much, I was not a good reader, which means I comprehended very poorly, which means I tested very poorly. And he taught me how to read. He taught me how to, catch myself when I started misreading words.
Right.
And that changed everything.
Wow. I mean, that talk about somebody impacting your life.
Don't even remember his name, but I remember what he did and how he explained it to me, and it was really important lessons. And then I started becoming a completely different student. Changed over to sciences. My dream was chiropractic because I was a chiropractic patient from a little kid. We had a chiropractor 3 doors down, and I guess the rest is history. I just I transferred. I did pre-med and then went out to California, started med school out in Lorenzo, California, on the north coast of California, out the southern coast of San Francisco, let's say, or the San Francisco Bay.
Right.
And transferred back here in '82 and finished up my college and graduated in '85.
Wow.
And I met a best friend who I was best man at his wedding. We're very close today. I met him, and he was Mr. New Jersey twice and competed in the national championships. He taught me bodybuilding.
Wow.
And he got me into it.
Wow. So there's another person that influenced your life.
So many.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. So now, from my perspective, looking at, and learning a little bit about you, I mean, I fully understand you taking that personal focus of wellness and health and nutrition to keep yourself healthy, especially with, the impact of losing your dad. But now you finished college, you're now a doctor of chiropractic. I can see how that interest or that focus has evolved, not just for you personally, but now to help other people. I guess people can help other people in so many different ways. You choosing chiropractic, again, mainly because you had someone in your neighborhood that, when do you actually start going to a chiropractor?
I started going as a child.
As a child.
Because I was a wrestler.
Right.
I used to come home with terrible stiff necks. and he would treat me. And
Of
I
course,
thought,
people would be pounding on you for a couple of hours.
yes, and I just love the idea of creating better health in a person using the hands and not using drugs. I mean, I thought it was a really neat thing.
Yeah, right. So when did you actually, like, I know that you had your own practice for a while, and in going into your own practice, obviously now there's a whole nother aspect of what you're doing. I mean, you're just not treating people, but now you're running a business. So now looking for some, anyone in particular that helped you with building your practice.
Yeah, two men, Larry Moxon and Danny Drubin, both doctors, both well known in the field.
Yeah.
I started taking business classes. I recognized right away, I was good at my art, if you will, but I had no idea how to run a business. They don't teach any.
I'm going to share something with you that you probably don't know.
Please.
I know Dr. Larry Moxon.
You do?
Yeah. Matter of fact, he was a client of mine in my IT company. The software that he ran to run his office, I developed and I supported for many years.
And Danny Drubin was his partner.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. It is it's a small world.
Yes, it is.
You better watch out who you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So they're the ones who kind of taught you the right way of running a practice, being efficient, understanding how to deal with, I guess dealing with insurance companies had to be a nightmare.
Probably the main reason I sold and retired back when I did.
Wow.
Took all the enjoyment out of it after time.
So I know that Dr. Moxon did a lot of public speaking as well.
Yes.
And, was he the influence that moved you into public speaking?
Yeah. So that's probably one of my favorite topics, I think, because it really created so much of my knowledge in pushing myself. So my first talk, the goal of speaking publicly was basically just to build my practice, to introduce people. So I did my first spinal health class, August 16th, 1988. Why do I remember the date? Well, August 16th was my dad's birthday. 1988 was the year I got married, and the bodybuilding championship. So it was smack in the middle of that.
Wow.
And it was a large room. First of all, 2 people showed up.
I'm glad you had the space.
It was the most uncomfortable. Boy, it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. I hummed and hawed, and it was not a good experience.
No.
And right after that, already on a path of self-improvement, which started 12 years earlier, I just decided I'm going to find out how to speak in public. And I went to a 16-week program with I wanted to say Arthur Murray.
No, that's Dan.
But yeah. It will come to me. And I took a 16-week course. It's a very famous company, right in Hong Kong now, I believe. And basically, it was public speaking.
Yeah.
And I was very uncomfortable with it. But every week for 16 weeks, I had to give a 5-minute talk and a 2-minute talk. 5 minutes planned talk, 2 minutes kind of, I guess, they ask you a question and just start speaking.
Right.
And I learned a lot about fear. I learned a lot about how to break through fear. I'm actually writing a book on perspective, and 1/4 of the book is about fear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
I know that you're writing a book. I was going to ask you about that a little bit later.
That's fine.
But no, well, we're there now. So,
okay.
So I know that you've been working on this. This has been a project for you for a little bit.
Yeah,
and you're working on it. Yeah, but it's coming along.
Yes.
I've had the privilege of actually seeing little bits and pieces of it.
It's almost complete.
Yeah. But getting back to public speaking for a second. So generally, when people want to be public speakers, they usually have something that's kind of burning inside them to say.
I didn't.
You didn't.
What happened, but thank you. It's a great point. I did not have a burning passion to speak or something to say. I just wanted to build my practice.
Okay. So, and you said that, well, if I'm speaking, then people are going to hear more about me and I'll be able to build my practice.
And I could tell them about why you go to a chiropractor. Back in the 80s, a lot of people didn't even know really what chiropractic was yet. It was just getting popular.
Yeah.
And it was just a perfect time. I never dreamt that I was going to build a philosophical approach and a love for speaking.
Yeah.
I did not, that wasn't a plan.
No, but now now you're speaking to companies, organizations. I'm assuming, well, I mean, you can tell me what the general topic is. I mean, I know that, in your introduction, we talked about the impact, right, of that, having that, in that professional side of things, but and the psyche of all of that. But talk about a little bit about what that subject is now.
Yeah, so I think the best way to, it all falls under what I consider the psychology of achievement. But first, exploring achievement, most people think of success as wealth. I mean,
right.
And I try to steer a little bit away from that, to be honest with you, because I think that people who focus just on wealth, and that's what our society sells us on, right, as success. I think that if we stay focused on that, what our life becomes is just trying to accumulate as much as possible, so we can retire and not do anything until we die. And I don't think God's purpose for us was that. In fact, there's a lot in the Bible, as you know, that warns us against focusing on wealth.
Yeah.
Not that it's not a curse to be wealthy, but most who are wealthy probably turn away from their faith because they feel like they need it less.
Yeah, well, I think that, my experience has been that we kind of focus on the provision and we kind of forget about the provider. We think that we're so great, and frankly, without his help, that we don't get put in the positions that we could use to give some talents that he gives us. And I want to talk a little bit about that as well. But before we get there, so you've now created you actually have a company.
Yes.
That you've formed to handle your public speaking engagements,
yes,
and those kinds of things. You make money at doing that.
I do.
Right. But yet you still practice the chiropractic medicine.
Yeah, a little. Now I sold my practice.
I mean, why?
Okay, that's a good question. I sold my practice. I think at this stage in my life, it's all about where God is leading me. I had no plans of going back into practice, but back just 3.5 years ago, I guess it was September of 2019. Yeah, 20. My wife was away taking a continuing education course for her schooling, and it was the weekend before Memorial Day. Labor Day, and I got something on Indeed that was talking about, this chiropractic office looking for something a little more than just chiropractic, doing a little bit more.
Right.
And I was like, well, it interested me.
Again, health and wellness, though. I mean, you're talking about wellness, a holistic approach to wellness.
Plus, I had the experience, from 2001 to 2017, I was the director of natural medicine and rehabilitation in Branchburg, New Jersey. So I had just developed a passion for running multidisciplined offices. This was a multidisciplined office. I went, met the doctor, told him what I thought I could do, and it's been a pretty successful story since then.
So if I could, just as an observation, just to connect some of the dots, early in your life, through the relationship that you had with your dad, and losing him early in life allowed you to focus on something that was important to you, health and wellness. And from an observation, I look at that as being something that is personal, something good for you. All right. But then continuing through college, becoming a chiropractor, now you're expanded that influence from being personal to now helping other people. And then expanding it yet again, speaking to corporations, doing some public speaking, talking about the importance about wellness in that environment, not just from a body standpoint and nutrition standpoint, but also now getting more and more, from a mentality standpoint, again, expanding your influence. So I'm looking at this as someone as an outsider saying that, well, it started personal, then it expanded to the people that you got to physically touch. And now through your teaching and addressing audiences, you're now expanding that influence yet again. So you and I, we were introduced at a faith-based businessmen's event called Businessmen of Faith.
Yep.
It was also hosted by Men's Discipleship Network. That was done with Pastor Scott Thieser. Again, seems like a very different venue than what you had in the past. So
it was.
Yeah. And what brought you to that?
I felt that God had been calling me for a long time. Most of my studies, I did some Bible studies, with other people, but it wasn't, it didn't really feed into me. It really didn't so much into me. And I was still interested. I knew that he was calling me in a direction other than the direction I had been going all my life, which was really all about wealth, success, being the best doctor, and all about that.
All about self.
So I wanted to see what this was about. And, MDN, in a lot of ways, one of the best things that ever happened to me. The men that I've met, my dearest friends are all MDN men.
Well, so you were introduced to Men's Discipleship Network and got involved with that, so much so that you became the chief operating officer of the organization, working with Pastor Scott and his wife Debbie.
Yeah.
Again, that's a pretty big stretch from where you started as a. What a journey! What a journey!
I know. I think God has blessed me with wonderful skill sets, and MDN recognized some of them. And since I was at that point, I was completely retired. I was kind of like, sure.
Yeah, ready to do a little bit. Let's see what.
My heart was into it. I thought I was volunteering for a position, but it kind of grew a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how.
That's what happens with volunteer armies, right? You find someone who's willing, and we basically get as much out of you as we possibly can.
Yeah. But it blessed me. It blessed me.
Yeah. And it does. We get that, and you're still involved. You're not the COO anymore, but you're still involved. I mean, I know that I know you have an event this evening that you're helping running and stuff like that.
Yes.
So one of the things that I thought we could talk briefly about is your journey of coming to faith. Because, again, my understanding is that, you were, I guess, grew up in a Jewish home, and now, and it's not that he's a Christian now, although he is. He's really
I'm a Jew.
You're a Jew who has found Messiah, really, right?
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about that journey.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is a lot of people get really confused with a Jew who found the Messiah, but in the first century, all the disciples were Jews.
Get out of town.
Yeah. There was no such thing as Christianity yet. And Jesus had mostly taught, in fact, the first Gentiles who came into the faith was on Pentecost. And Pentecost at the time was a Jewish holiday that people came into Jerusalem for. And I guess basically the term Christian was given by the Romans for Jews who were kind of, let's say, they thought causing trouble by following this Messiah.
Yeah. The Christ, therefore Christian.
But of course, it was
the way. They actually they call them the way many times as well.
Waymaker.
Yeah. So was there anyone, that was influential in helping you through that portion of the journey?
Well, for the first part of the journey, which really from when I was very young, I had no religious upbringing. None of my extended family was religious in any way. So I never saw a Bible except when you were in a hotel, which was rare.
Yeah.
I had nothing until I met MDN.
Wow.
And then Pastor Scott Caesar kind of he's half Jewish. His
Yeah.
father was Jewish.
Yeah.
We kind of clicked, and he kind of took me under his wing, and had a personal interest in me. And so I'd have to really point to him in how my walk matured.
Interesting.
And honestly, a lot of men like you down at MDN that I could look and say, that's what I want my walk to look like. A man who had a deeper sense of maturity than I was at that. I wasn't at that level yet.
Right. So one of the things out of this podcast talk that we're doing is that we go back and we can kind of trace back, and we can say that, well, this happened and I was influenced by, in your case, your dad, and then you got involved with and knowing the chiropractor that was down the road, and the influence that he had. Then we had the influence of you going through one of your teachers that found out that you had a reading problem, and how they taught you how to read correctly and how to adjust from that handicap that that you had. Then we see Dr. Larry Markson and his team sewing into you to teach you how to run that business, and then being trained for public speaking. I mean, you didn't do really much for yourself at all, right? You had all these people that kind of helped, and those relationships. What I want to get to is those relationships. Right. How important those relationships are to us and to everyone.
One thing I figured out early on.
Yeah.
I don't know how I figured it out, but I think God had given me many wonderful gifts that I can just look up and say thank you. But I figured out early on in my subconscious brain that I didn't need to figure anything out. I just needed to meet people who had it figured out and let them teach me.
Yeah.
And I find that the most successful people you will ever meet, who have maybe in some ways the least amount of time, are the people most willing to give up their time to help somebody else.
Yeah. So let me flip the coin here a little bit. Sure. We talked about these positive influencing relationships. What about negative ones? Anyone was negative or that caused you to think differently or to bring you to a point?
It's a good question. I think I have a unique upbringing. I grew up on one of 6 boys. There was a lot of love in the family. Mm-hmm. I don't really remember anything very negative about the family other than maybe my father's business stress early on.
Right.
But I don't, I just have a lot of great memories with a lot of great people. I didn't associate with anybody who didn't make me feel good.
Yeah. So, okay. So unfortunately, that's not the case for a lot of people. Right. A lot of people, we have relationships that are toxic, that are not enhancing us at all. They try to pull us down, things like that. I think that really working on relationships is really
association is
so difficult, isn't it?
Such a key part of, I think, our lives. Like, today, I don't associate much with anyone outside of a strong faith. Now, I have friends who, heck, I have family who are atheists. Mm-hmm. I have friends who don't even want to hear about God. Mm-hmm. And they're still dear to me.
Yeah.
But the people I'm most comfortable with are people who are like-minded. Because for me, the first thing in my life, if you want to talk to me about something, I'd rather talk about my faith.
Yeah.
And, when we get together, we talk about life as it relates to, well, what would God think? Where does God want you? And it's all about our faith, looking up.
So, I mean, obviously then you have this relationship with, what we call God Almighty. For those of you that may be watching this that may not quite have that same take on it, we both kind of feel that, that God is involved with our life, and he's involved with our life all the time, whether we're aware of it or not, right?
Yeah.
So how would you, or how do you nurture that relationship that you have with your God?
That's a great question. I think what I've come to learn come to believe is that the relationship you have with God is no different than the relationship you have with anybody else.
Mm.
If I don't spend any time thinking about you, talking to you, or being with you, we're probably not going to be very close.
Yeah.
And
it's really as simple as that. Yeah. I don't think God makes it all that difficult. I think we make it kind of difficult.
Listen, in the beginning, first of all, I'm also ADHD. I grew up.
You're a mess, aren't you?
Yeah, I grew up with a severe language impediment. I was pulled out of class for 7 years, every single day.
Really?
To learn how to speak, because basically everyone said what to me.
So you had a person who helped you talk.
Well, in school,
right? Speech, you had speech, and what happened?
Me and my kid brother had this.
Yeah.
We both had severe speech impediments.
A lot of
if
people.
you really listen to it, a lot of people
helped you.
But I was very blessed that just, God just kept putting the right people in my life.
Yeah.
Right in front of me. I do believe it's much more a blessing than look at me. It's just a blessing.
So I understand that you have 2 young men that you mentor.
Yes, I do.
And you speak so wonderfully about them when we do speak of them. I don't think I've ever met them myself.
You haven't?
No, I don't think so, because you never invite me over when you're having a barbecue and they're there. So
yeah, I try not to invite them over, because boy, can they eat.
Can they eat, right?
My Lord.
But how did that occur? I mean, how did that come about?
Okay, so wonderful family, fatherless family, town over. My daughter was dating, there are 3 boys. My daughter was dating the oldest one, Ryan. And Charles and Russell, these 2 boys, are his younger brothers. And Ryan, I wish I had a picture of him, was, if he had competed, he would have won the national teenage championship.
Really?
I mean, it was,
wow.
He was every bit of a professional without even knowing it. And he was just wonderful. And they dated, and I adored him. One day he had a seizure. 15 months later, he was gone. He had brain cancer. Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
A very aggressive brain cancer.
Wow.
And he left behind these 2 boys and their mom. And I became, I felt like they needed someone. My daughter kind of asked if I would teach them bodybuilding. That's how it started. They're 2 wonderful men, and our culture difference is dramatic. They're African American. They're fatherless. I'm older than their parents. That's I'm kind of old enough to be their grandfather.
Wow.
They're 23 and 24, and I'm 40 years old.
Right. How often do you meet with them?
Well, we don't meet like that.
Right.
They're part of my family now. So, we see it like this tomorrow, Saturday. Saturday, we're going to the movies.
Right.
They're my movie buddies, because
Okay.
my wife doesn't like the movies I like.
Right.
We go see the Marvel movies and stuff, and we hang out.
Yeah.
And I try to sew into them. Charles has come to some of the events, and Charles is, knows TJ.
Right.
And it's really a blessing. What a blessing.
So it's obviously, you're sewing into them. I know that you get stuff out of it too, because we speak about that, but looking at, again, going back to your passion, your mission, right? Again, connecting the dots, started with you, expanded to your patients, expanded to those, not just, body and wellness, but now getting into more of the spiritual side of things. And now you're becoming the mentor to others, reaching them yet on another plane. Not just body and soul, but spirit now. What would you say then is your greatest passion now? Because our passion evolves, right? As God brings us to a place, he teaches us something, we move there, and then he says, I got something else for you, I have something else for you.
Yes.
So what would you say your greatest passion is now as a mature man, living here in the 21st century?
I think, and I just want to preface it, I do believe God put this passion on my heart But I think it is to bring the non-believer, the casual believer, not necessarily Christians, probably more like Jewish people, to faith.
Yeah.
Bringing them to faith. And especially, I really enjoy the casual believer because they're like, yeah, I believe in God, but it means nothing to them, really. But they believe.
Yeah.
So there's not resistance. I haven't found myself very effective yet with the resistant non-believer. I don't know where God exactly is going to put me, but I look forward to wherever it is.
Maybe he's going to use this book that you're now writing.
I do believe.
Tell us about this book.
Okay. The Power of Perspective. So it's a life work on me. And, 35 years ago, literally, if not a little more than that, God put on my heart to write a book. That's a long time to ignore what he put on my heart. And I did ignore it for a long time. And it was going to be a self-help book because that's what I was into. And it evolved into, I guess, the philosophy that grew within me and my faith. So now, I was up against trying to write still a self-help book because there's so much about me that is more like practical, not necessarily spiritual advice and how we think, how we address fear. Although I can bring spirit now into everything because that's my faith, but I still think he would not give me what he gave me in my mind without wanting me to share it.
So is this a faith-based book?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because it doesn't have a faith-based title.
No, it doesn't. But I am already, planning what the second book is, and that's going to probably be a perspective of faith. And I'm going to leave perspective in. But what this book is, there's 4 parts right now to it, basically, and it's almost complete. Part 1 is what is perspective, about it's 11 chapters. Part 2 talks about fear. Part 3 is self-talk. And part 4 is the perspective of faith. And, my philosophical approach to the book, writing the book, what God, I think, has finally laid out for me, because I was confused for a while of how to make it a faith-based book, is that the Bible is probably not only the best, but the oldest book written about changing your perspective. In fact, if God didn't need to change our perspective, I don't know that he'd need to leave his word. But it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. The first will be last and the last will be first. And all these things that are just the opposite of
culturally what we learned.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I think of the Bible is, besides that it's the greatest book ever written, God wrote it, it's a great book on perspective. So that's part 4, and I hope it leads readers. I hope not only obviously to write it, to have people read it. That's what I care about.
Right.
And then to have them say, oh, I want to read more about faith.
And then go on to your next book.
That's my goal.
He's selling.
Yeah, I am.
But listen, I know you talk about, how it's very practical. I think God is practical. I mean, God is practical.
I really, at this stage in my life, if you gave me the choice of selling 100,000 of those books and making $1 million,
right,
or selling 5 million of those books and not making a penny, I'd rather sell the 5 million.
Really?
Because at this point, I'm past the point that I'm doing it for money. This is like, I'm living for him now.
Yeah.
I look to him for everything. I just want to do this right. The money part, I just want to do it right.
Okay.
I want to fulfill the purpose he put into me. And I know it's a lot bigger than I'm not complete.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So we're about to close this episode, but I want to give you last opportunity, maybe a last comment to talk to the audience.
Yeah.
And just to kind of, whatever you want to say.
Yeah. I always wanted to be happy. That's why I went into self-help, to learn how to be happy. And when I figured out how to be happy and turned to God, it was interesting that I learned that being happy isn't that important to God. Not that he doesn't want us to be happy, but he wants us to be happy following his way and his will and not our own.
Yeah.
He wants, and that actually brings joy instead of happiness. Happiness, I feel, is very external.
Mm-hmm.
You know, friends, your relationships make you happy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But it's fleeting.
Yeah.
You know, relationships change,
Mm-hmm.
people change. I think we're kind of broken in our own way without God.
Yeah.
And God kind of completes us. But when we turn to God, it's an internal joy that is not fleeting. And you know, he promised us, seek and you will find. I think it's the greatest path I could ever put anyone on, is to seek him and his presence.
Wow. Powerful. Powerful. So hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to thank Dr. Andrew Sirlin, my good friend, for being with us today. Oh, you're very, very welcome. And you know, and like I said, I hope you enjoyed this. But more importantly, I think, you know, take that little bit of break, that seventh inning stretch, getting into baseball season now, you know, and think about your journey a little bit, you know, because, you know, whether we believe it or not, whether we understand it or not, whether we even acknowledge it or not, God is with us throughout our eternal life.
May I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
You know, certainly wasn't planned. Not that any of this was planned, but seventh inning stretch, a book that, as you know, Dennis Labriola wrote, and I had the pleasure of reading and endorsing.
Yes, you did.
And it's an honor. I honor. He's a dear friend, so I'd say something nice about it, even if I didn't like it, and that would be the truth. However, I think it is one of those very rare books that God has a very special plan for, because I believe it fulfills exactly what my passion is, which is bringing the casual believer, have them reading stories about old, you know, your olden days, if you will, and let's face it, they're really olden, that are really that anyone can relate to, and then afterwards finding humor in it, interest in it, warmth in it, and then all of a sudden you create an afterthought for this, and you show us how God's presence was there, where you could have read the story 100 times and not seen God in it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there he is. Yeah. And that is what I think God so wants for people to know and to learn, is that he's always there in all of these moments. And I think that book is going to really change the reader in very powerful ways.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, for that encouragement.
That's how I feel about it.
And you know, so I use 3 words: remember, acknowledge, and appreciate. All those people in your life, whether they were positive or negative, God used them, and God continues to use them, because he's not done with you yet. So I just want to wish you blessings, and if you don't know him, just introduce yourself, have a conversation. That's really all it takes. He's really closer than you think. And I just want to wish you all just a wonderful, wonderful blessing, and be well. Until next time, God bless.